Hi everyone, I'm Celeste. Welcome to my BookTube channel. Recently, in the comments below one of my videos, one of my subscribers asked which Miss Marple books I would recommend. And it got me thinking because it made me realize that even though I have now produced over 100 BookTube videos and I'm in my second and a half year of making BookTube videos, I don't think I have ever done a video that is dedicated to Miss Marple. Before I begin with my sort of ranking of the 7 novels I've read with Miss Marple, I just wanted to, for any of those of you who don't know or may not know, give you a little bit of info about who Miss Marple is. Jane Marple, who's usually known as Miss Marple, appears in 12 of Agatha Christie's crime novels, and she also appears in over 20 of her short stories. Miss Marple is an elderly spinster. She acts as an amateur detective, and she lives in the small village of St. Mary Mead. She has various friends and associates who are characters who reoccur in a number of her books. She looks like an ordinary elderly lady. She's always dressed neatly. She's always kind of prim and proper. She wears tweed and sensible shoes and carries kind of a large carpet bag. She's frequently seen knitting or working in her garden or walking around St. Mary Mead and saying hello to people. She sometimes comes across as what Agatha Christie terms as fluffy, meaning kind of scattered or lost in her thoughts, but she's really not. She has a very sharp and logical mind, and she uses it to solve crimes in St. Mary Mead and also elsewhere. And the way she solves her crimes is usually based on her knowledge of human nature, based on various residents around her who have taught her about life and about human nature, and she applies it to a crime scene and to a murderer's motives, and is able to solve crimes through her knowledge of people and how people act and how their characters are. And I can tell you that thus far I have read 7 books by Agatha Christie in the Miss Marple series. I have also read a number of her short stories. So that being said, I wanted to go through the 7 Miss Marple books that I've read so far. I do plan on reading more in 2025, but I want to go through the ones I've read so far and go from least favorite to most favorite. Now, when I say least favorite, please know that I love all of them. I would read all of them again. It's just that some are even better than others. So even though this one I'm going to tell you about first is considered my least favorite of the 7 I've read, I still really like it. It still has a warm place in my heart, so please don't think that least favorite means don't bother with it. So there you go. In any event, I would say that in 7th place would be At Bertrams Hotel. And this is really a fun story. It takes place at a hotel. Miss Marple has been given a 2-week holiday in London at Bertrams Hotel, where she used to go when she was a little girl. And it is known for its luxurious style and the way it treats its customers so well, and they know you by name, and the room furnishings are cozy and comfortable and appropriate and beautifully appointed, and the food is good and the company is good, and the guests are, you're always seeing someone you know there at Bertram's, but it's kind of off the beaten path, so it's not like, it's not like a Days Inn or a Econo Lodge or anything like that. It's a lovely, old-fashioned, unique, bespoke restaurant and hotel. And so yeah, bespoke would be a good way to put it. And I'm very fond of that because I went to the University of Toronto, and whenever my parents would come up to visit, they would stay at a little bespoke hotel, sort of like that would remind me of a place like Bertram's. And you know, with the chauffeurs and with the attendant at the door, and the bellhops and the waiters and waitresses, and you know, the cook in the kitchen and all of that, and good customer service like they had in the old days. And so yeah, so there's a very fond place in my heart for Bertram's Hotel. But in any event, Miss Marple takes a 2-week holiday at Bertram's in London, and at first she thinks it's just so perfect. It's exactly the way I remember. It still has that Edwardian era style. Various things start to happen, and a murder ensues, and Miss Marple is called upon to solve the crime. It's an interesting book, and I did like it, and I love the atmosphere of the hotel for solving the crime, because that sort of introduces its whole own set of locked room mystery components. You know, when it's set in a hotel, it's interesting. So yeah, perfectly decent, good Agatha Christie novel, worth a read, at Bertram's Hotel in place number 7. Okay, in 6th place out of 7 in the Miss Marple books I've read so far is The Murder at the Vicarage. And this is actually the very first novel in the Miss Marple series. And it's the first novel that Agatha Christie wrote featuring Miss Marple and her village of St. Mary Mead. And it takes place at the local vicarage. There's a character called the Reverend Leonard Clement, and he's the vicar of St. Mary Mead. He lives with his much younger wife, Griselda. And another neighbor is Colonel Lucius Prothero, who serves as the local magistrate, and he's quite pompous and full of himself and not a very nice person. And Colonel Prothero ends up being murdered, and it's up to Miss Marple, with the aid of others in the village, to solve the mystery of who killed Colonel Prothero. And so it's a little bit different from the Miss Marples that came after it. As the first book in the Miss Marple series, Agatha Christie wasn't quite sure of how she wanted Miss Marple to be yet. She had written a number of short stories about Miss Marple, but in this first novel, Miss Marple's a little bit more severe, I would say, and in later books she becomes gentler. So that's a difference between this and the later Miss Marple books. But it's really good. It's fun. It introduces you to all the local characters of St. Mary Mead. It kind of gives you the layout of the village and introduces you to Miss Marple and her crime-solving style. And I have heard a number of people discuss this book on YouTube before, but one of the things I seldom hear about it in their critiques is the humor. There's a great deal of humor in this book, especially within the marriage between the Reverend Leonard Clement and his wife Griselda. There's a lot of humor. There's a lot of travails that they go through between the older conservative Reverend and his much younger wife, and her trying to do her duty by housekeeping and cooking and feeling frazzled and everything. It can be very funny in spots, and I love seeing Agatha Christie's sort of mirthful sense of humor that bubbles through in this one. Even though there's a murder occurring and it needs to be solved, it's still a lot of fun. So this would be in 6th place for me, The Murder at the Vicarage. Okay, so in 5th place of the 7 Miss Marple books I've read would be The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. This is really a fun one, and it also takes place in St. Mary Mead. The basic premise of the plot is that Miss Marple falls. She takes a tumble while walking in St. Mary Mead. She's helped by a neighbor called Heather Babcock, who brings her into her own home and attends to her and nurses her. And over tea, Ms. Babcock tells Miss Marple how she met the American actress Marina Gregg, who has recently moved into the area and bought Gossington Hall from Miss Marple's friend, Dolly Bantry. And Marina and her latest husband have come from Hollywood, and they're going to host a party in honor of a local charity called St. John's Ambulance, and that is probably, to introduce herself to the neighbors there and to feel like part of the community and like she's supporting the community. And there are all kinds of guests there. We get introduced to Dolly Bantry, who is Miss Marple's friend, as well as an actress named Lola Brewster, and a whole cast of others. And at the party, a murder occurs, and then Miss Marple, along with the help of the inspector and her friends, such as Dolly Bantry, need to solve the crime. This is a really fun one. It's a more modern one. I think this was from 1962. In any event, it's a really fun one to read if you are interested in a more modern Miss Marple book that will tell you all about St. Mary Mead and about the various people who live there. And then in fourth place, the next Agatha Christie Miss Marple book I would recommend is 450 from Paddington. And this was probably the first Miss Marple book I ever read when I was much younger. This was published in 1957, and it's set in the winter time. And in the United States, it was actually published as What Mrs. McGillicuddy Saw. And so Miss Marple has a friend named Elspeth McGillicuddy, wonderful name, and she goes to visit her friend Jane Marple. And as she's going to visit Jane, she's taking a train. Her train passes another train running in the same direction, and through the windows into the other train car, she witnesses a man on the other train with his back to her strangling a woman. And Mrs. McGillicuddy describes to Miss Marple the dying woman as having blonde hair and wearing a fur coat. And the man is tall and dark, but she only saw his back. So Miss Marple believes her and decides to solve the mystery. And they have to figure out what happened to the body and who the murderer is. And so in order to do that, Miss Marple sends in a cook and a housekeeper whose name is Lucy Ilesborough, and she sends her to go work at a house called Rutherford Hall, and she sends her in as kind of a spy. She's a plant, and she has to find out where the body is and who the murderer is. And the reason she sends her to go work there is because Miss Marple deduces that the body must have been gotten rid of in the area of Rutherford Hall. She works that out through maps and things like that. So it's really interesting. And again, I'm not really giving much away because most of the action takes place after that. But that's the premise. And so, yeah, it's really fun. It's a great one to read around Christmas time. I love mysteries that are set on trains and involve like train schedules and things like that. Lucy Ilesborough is a fascinating character as a cook and housekeeper. She's kind of a sleuth in her own right, but she's acting as a spy, getting information for Miss Marple. So it's just a really fun one, and one I highly recommend. Definitely a cozy. And then in place number 3, I would say The Body in the Library is my next favorite. And Miss Marple has a friend named Dolly Bantry. Dolly and Colonel Bantry live at Gossington Hall. I adore Dolly Bantry, her character, both in books and on screen. One morning, Dolly Bantry is woken by one of the maids coming up the stairs, whimpering and terrified and saying that she has just discovered a dead body in the library of Gossington Hall. And the body is of a young woman. They go downstairs. She's lying on the hearthrug in front of the fire, and she's been painted with heavy makeup. She has platinum blonde hair. She has a silver spangled dress. It's all very odd. And so Miss Marple is called in by Dolly to help solve the mystery. And part of it takes place at a seaside hotel where she and Dolly go. It's just a really fun, cozy, and, you know, a body in a library is classic. So it's just a really good classic one. I absolutely adore in the 1980s Joan Hickson movie adaptations of Miss Marple. I love Gwen Watford, who portrays Dolly Bantry. And yeah, so I always picture her. Whenever Dolly appears in one of the Miss Marple books, I immediately picture Gwen Watford, the actress. So it's a really fun one. So that's number 3. My second favorite Miss Marple book so far, of the ones I've read, is A Murder is Announced. And this is such a favorite that's near and dear to my heart. It was published in 1950, and it was Christie's 50th novel. So basically, the villagers of Chipping Cleghorn are surprised to see in a newspaper one day there is an advertisement saying a murder is announced and will take place Friday, October 29th at Little Paddocks at 6:30. And the owners of Little Paddock are just as surprised as anybody else. No one knows who placed the ad. No one knows why they're saying that, you know, there's going to be a murder there. And they presume it's going to be some kind of a fun joke or party, and so the people who live at Little Paddocks are playing it up and expecting people to come in. So all the villagers do come in at that time. Miss Marple, I believe, is there for, I think, a medical appointment. I don't remember why she's there, but she's staying there. And so everyone goes to Little Paddocks at the appointed time, and a murder does indeed occur. But how could that happen in a closed house, in a room, while everyone is sitting there? How is it done? And the story goes from there. It's another interesting Miss Marple. I love the fact that it takes place, the whole whodunit takes place in the house while everyone is there. I love how Miss Marple deduces what happened and why, and what the motivations were. So this is just the coziest, most fun, most Britishy golden age mystery. It was tough for me to decide whether to put this as my top one or as my second choice, but it's definitely up there in my top 2. So yeah, A Murder is Announced is a wonderful Agatha Christie to read. And it's, you know, perfect quintessential tiny village in the British countryside fare. So I highly, highly recommend A Murder is Announced. And finally, in first place of the 7 Agatha Christie Miss Marple books that I have read so far, my top pick is A Caribbean Mystery. I love this book. This is a perennial favorite. This is one that I will pull out and read and reread probably throughout the rest of my life. It's just so enjoyable. And this one actually does not take place in St. Mary Mead. This takes place at the Golden Palm Resort on the Caribbean island of Saint Honoré. And Miss Marple's nephew, Raymond West, who is a famous novelist, has sent Miss Marple to this resort for rest and relaxation and rehab. And so Miss Marple has been sent there just to forget everything, forget her mystery solving, and just relax and sit by the ocean and drink her drinks and, you know, do her knitting. And instead, of course, a murder ensues and Miss Marple is there to solve it. So there is a character there. His name is Major Palgrave, and he runs on and on and on talking about this and that, and he's kind of a bore, and people have to tolerate him when he comes and sits down with them. One day he sits down next to Miss Marple, and she's trying to be polite, and he's telling her about his various adventures that he's had throughout his life, and one of them involves he takes out a photograph, and he says to her, I met a murderer once. Would you like to see a photo? And she says yes, and that kind of catches her attention. And he pulls out a photo, but while he's showing it to her, he looks up and gets distracted because of something he's seeing behind Miss Marple's shoulder. And he quickly puts the photograph away again, and then he ends up dead. Major Palgrave does. And so Miss Marple now needs to solve the mystery of who killed Major Palgrave. And there are a bunch of guests staying at the Golden Palm Resort, and they're all suspects. They all have their own unique backstories. And Miss Marple, interestingly, applies the same logic to solve the murder here as she does if she were back home in St. Mary Mead. And the thing that impacts me most about a Caribbean mystery is its sense of location, the sand, the water, and the heat, the overriding heat, and how they stay in these little bungalows and things like that. It's really a great escapist read, and so much fun, and such a fun one to solve. And it also features one of my favorite recurring characters, which is Jason Raphael, who is a very cantankerous elderly man with a large fortune who is confined to a wheelchair, and he's a real curmudgeon and no one likes him, but he likes Miss Marple and gets along with her. And together they actually solve the mystery. Mostly Miss Marple does, but Jason Raphael helps. And he will show up again in another novel by Agatha Christie, so I'm looking forward to that one too. But this one, I always refer to it as one of my desert island books, because if you were in a fire and you could only grab one Agatha Christie, I think this is the one that I would grab, because it's just so rereadable and enjoyable. So yeah. That's it. Those are the 7 Miss Marple books that I have read so far. I have not included short stories, Miss Marple short stories that I've read in this. I'm only doing the novels. In case you're wondering, the editions that I collect are the HarperCollins facsimile editions that came out in the early 2000s. I love these because they have the original look of the Collins Crime Club, and with some of the original cover art. And there was a lady actually on Facebook who was looking to sell her collection because she had duplicates of many of the titles, and she sold them to me at such a reasonable cost I just couldn't refuse. So I had these actually shipped over from England, and would never be able to get them for the price I paid. I ended up, I think, paying maybe $5 a piece for these, and it was just a steal. And I have a bunch more that I am not showing you today. They're actually up on this shelf up here. So all of these are also Agatha Christie books, which I have yet to show you in future Agatha Christie videos. But that's it for today. Please let me know in the comments down below, what are your favorite Miss Marple books, and how many of them have you read, and which one are you reading next? For me, it's going to be The Moving Finger. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. And I can only speak to the ones I've read. I've only read 7. So I still have several to go. So I will do another video of my favorite Miss Marples, ranking them in order after I've finished reading all the other Miss Marples. But for now, that's it. Let me know what your favorites are in the comments below, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.